Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Jane DeSalta. I'm the Vice President of the Southern New Jersey Development Council. For those of you who are new to our organization, the Development Council is a nonprofit business association whose mission is to promote economic growth in the South Jersey region, which we do through our efforts in hand-on economic development and our advocacy. In addition, we also provide access to information that supports business retention and growth, including today's program, which is a product of our Economic Development Committee, whose co-chairs Bill Whalen from Ocean First Bank and Sam Donaldson of AECOM. Before we begin, a couple of notes. We plan to have approximately 10-15 minutes at the end for questions and answers, and I'd ask you to submit your question through the Zoom Q&A feature. We are recording the webinar, and we will share in an email the link to the replay and the download of the presentations of the slides you're about to see. We also will receive a program book link that will have the directory of attendees and contact information for everyone. That way you can connect and engage with one another. And before we close the program, we will share in the chat feature the link to today's breakout sessions that will begin 11:40 after our program concludes. It'll be the same link for everyone, and then once enough people are logged in, Zoom will automatically put you in your assigned breakout room. And now we'll begin. I want to thank the sponsors of today's program. The title sponsor is South Jersey Port Corporation, Andy Saporito, whom you'll hear from in a moment. Our presenting sponsors, Caldwell Marine, Jim Yule, Eastern Atlantic States Regional Council of Carpenters, Olaf Olson, Haley and Aldrich, Dane Herman, all of whom you're going to see in the breakout rooms. They're each going to host a breakout session. Our host sponsors, CNC Supply, French and Farrell Associates, and PSE&G. Our supporting sponsors, Lisa Carney Retail Agency, Keller Engineers, Pace Engineers, Performance Marketing, and Railroad Construction Company. And I'd like to recognize our partner organizations who help expand the outreach to include more South Jersey businesses to hear today's program. The Burlington County Chamber of Commerce, Trustee Howe, Camden County Chamber of Commerce, Joe Monforto, Cumberland County Improvement Authority, Jerry Velasquez, and the Gloucester County Chamber of Commerce, Janet Garrity. And also with us is the NJEDA, who's leading the development efforts establishing New Jersey's offshore wind industry. We're going to hear from Julia Portree a little later in the program. On behalf of our title sponsor, we have with us today Andy Saporito from the South Jersey Port Corporation. Andy was appointed Executive Director and CEO of the South Jersey Port Corporation in 2019 after a successful 38-year career at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. In his short time at the South Jersey Port, Andy and his new executive team have been exploring the potential to expand SJPC businesses while remaining focused to retain and grow their existing businesses. They've already signed a new tenant in Camden and announced significant investments to upgrade their equipment and facilities to operate cleaner and greener. Most notably, they recently announced that EEW will build its monopile manufacturing plant at the South Jersey Port's Hallsborough Marine Terminal. South Jersey is lucky to have Andy at the helm of the South Jersey Port Corporation, especially during this exciting time for offshore wind development. And I'm pleased to turn the program over to him. Andy?
Okay, well, thanks, Jane, and thanks for letting us sponsor this morning. You know, it's been a great time, my short time period down here. I think I'm almost on 19 months now, but you know, it's been great working with everybody in South Jersey and meeting a lot of people. And you know, I hope when things get a little better, we can actually meet in person again. I actually enjoyed the events that I had the opportunity to attend. If we go to the first slide, please. You know, I'd like to thank Jane and the team at the Development Council for putting together this very important panel and discussion. This is a very exciting time for New Jersey, and I believe South Jersey has the opportunity to be at the epicenter of the offshore wind industry and realize a very significant influx of jobs and economic impact to the region. And I think with the signing of EEW in Paulsboro, that's like the first part of it. And you know, I think I won't steal Lee's thunder, but it's going to lead to a significant number of jobs and support jobs. So, you know, as Jane said, we're trying to stay on top of this and ahead of it. A little more about the South Jersey Port Corporation. Our mission is to attract cargo and maritime related activity to foster economic development to create jobs. You know, we're a key part of the tri-state Delaware River maritime industry, which spurs about $77.8 billion worth of economic activity and supports over 190,000 jobs, you know, through the tri-state area. And we operate 4 marine terminals in 3 cities, as most people know, 2 in Camden, 1 in Paulsboro, and 1 in Salem. And we handle a diverse mix of cargo such as cocoa beans, wood products, cement, and steel. In fact, today we have a steel ship up in Camden. If we go to slide 2, please. You know, with respect to what we are all here to talk about today, the South Jersey Port Corporation is positioned to maximize the impact of offshore wind development along the East Coast. You know, we have an unparalleled location in terms of proximity to the planned wind port development, which you can see on the slide here to the south of our Salem facility. And we really believe that, you know, Salem, as we look at it, is going to become pivotal in supplying and supporting that facility as well as other facilities. We have space to support offshore wind due to investment in our facilities, available land, and warehouse space. And perhaps most importantly, we have an integrated network of highway, rail, and marine facilities that provide the needed infrastructure to support the offshore wind energy development. Again, I want to thank the Development Council for providing us with the opportunity to participate today. And I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you on how we can work together on this very exciting opportunity for South Jersey and the development of clean energy. So let me begin by welcoming our first speaker this morning from New Jersey EDA, Julia Courtray, who is a senior project officer at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, where she supports the development of the New Jersey wind port and the offshore wind supply chain in New Jersey. Julia collaborates with offshore wind industry stakeholders, including developers and manufacturers, in addition to public and social sector partners, to create new offshore wind initiatives and opportunities in New Jersey. Prior to joining New Jersey EDA, Julia worked on various social policy issues in Washington, D.C., including women's economic security, paid family and medical leave, and domestic food security. She was an Emerson National Hunger Fellow at the Congressional Hunger Center, with placements at the Texas Hunger Center and Congressional Research Service. She holds an MPA from the Maxwell School at Syracuse University and a BA from Emory University. So Julia, why don't you take it?
Thanks so much, Andy. And I'll take the next slide and we can get the presentation. There we go. So today I'm going to touch base on kind of 3 big buckets. One, just a quick refresher on offshore wind, just to set the stage for the presentation or for the event today. 2, go a little bit more over the New Jersey wind port and the exciting opportunities it'll bring to South Jersey. And 3rd, wanted to dive into how you can get more involved in the offshore wind industry and how to find your place as the industry develops. Next slide, please. So as you may have heard, offshore wind is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We expect over $100 billion in investment over the next 15 years across the East Coast. And New Jersey is well positioned to get more than our fair share of that investment, being both the geographical center of the current offshore wind industry on the East Coast, as well as being well positioned to produce and deliver manufacturing and other services as we reach our clean energy, our work toward our clean energy goals and our commitment to 7.5 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035. Next slide, please. So to help you kind of demystify or think through the cadence of offshore wind in New Jersey, I wanted to first start with kind of the solicitation schedule that the New Jersey BPU has developed to reach that 7.5 gigawatts of offshore wind. So as you may know, Ocean Wind, which is being delivered by Ørsted, was awarded the first project in 2019 of 1,100 megawatts, and it'll be in operation at some point in 2024. And we're currently going through the second solicitation process to award the, or excuse me, BPU is going through the second solicitation process to award the next project that will ultimately be in operation at some point in 2027. So the industry and the supply chain will really develop throughout these solicitations. And I think this cadence is a helpful way to think through how to time and be ready as you're thinking about where you belong in the supply chain, how to get involved, and what is the timing of those opportunities. Next slide, please. So as part of New Jersey's efforts to capture as much of the supply chain as possible, we are building the first purpose-built greenfield marshaling and manufacturing port on the East Coast. This is noteworthy for a number of reasons. There's over 200 acres of space for manufacturing and marshaling, which is essentially where components are have final assembly staged and then shipped out to their final installation location in the Atlantic Ocean. There are very few places on the East Coast that are able to accommodate components of this size. There are a number of challenges. There really can't be any overhead restrictions, so anything like a bridge or power cable lines restrict ability for folks to have a tier 1 manufacturing and marshaling area. So this is a really exciting opportunity for New Jersey, and we see that this would be one of the hubs for offshore wind manufacturing. And it doesn't just stay at the wind port. We also expect lower tier and smaller components that don't need to pay the premium to be at such a unique port to be located elsewhere along the Delaware River or further inland. And then those components will come to this hub where they can play into the supply chain. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, it's over 200 acres, and we'll be developing it over 2 phases. So the first phase of the project will open in 2023 with space for marshaling, which is the final assembly, staging, and then shipping out to sea, and an initial parcel for manufacturing. And then we'll expand over the coming years to complete the project by the end of 2026. So I think it's helpful here to see that there are multiple facilities essentially opening up over several years, which would be a huge economic boom, as I'll talk about in a second. We expect over $500 million of economic activity annually from the activity at the port. And then I also want to acknowledge that our neighbors that we've been working with to help get this port to market, PSEG, are right next door with the Hope Creek nuclear generating plant. So in some ways, we'll be creating a clean energy island of sorts. Next slide, please. So broadly, we've received many questions about how does Lower Alloways Creek and the Jersey Windport play into what's going on throughout the rest of the state. So as Lee will talk about later, and as Andy mentioned earlier, EW will be developing monopiles at the Port of Paulsboro. And Atlantic City and Cape May have often been spoken about as opportunities for operations and maintenance ports. which are ports used once the ports are the projects are installed and turbines are in the water. They're kind of ideally located as closely as possible to a lease area and are tend to be a little bit smaller. And then Newark and New York Harbor is used for a number of options. It could be additional operations and maintenance. It could also be manufacturing. There's lots of opportunities in the northern half of the state as well. But I put the turbine diagram on here just as to help orient folks as we're thinking about what will be made where. So you can see the monopile in yellow will be produced in Paulsboro, and then everything in that light gray above are things that could be produced at Lower Alloys Creek or nearby. So they're mutually beneficial to each other and serve unique purposes for the industry. Next slide, please. So we're expecting to start construction in late 2021. And as I mentioned before, open the first phase in 2023. So we've issued the initial RFQ for our construction manager and shortlisted those applicants to 5 proposals and then or 5 firms. And then we'll be issuing an RFP sometime this month to award the program or award the contract to one construction manager. The list of shortlisted companies can be found on our website in our procurement opportunities. And as you can see, it's a $300 to $400 million infrastructure investment. And we were very excited to see that Governor Murphy's 2022 budget announcement included a $200 million appropriation toward port development. So we're continuing to move forward to make the project a reality. Next slide, please. I specifically wanted to highlight of our commitments for the wind port is our effort to set a new standard for minority and women-owned businesses. We have in our CM contract RFQ and RFP a 15% set aside for minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. So that's of the contract value. We've also stood up an advisory committee to support diversity and local engagement as part of our efforts to fortify our commitment to inclusion. So that includes both supporting local and diverse businesses in South Jersey, as well as workers. Next slide, please. So next I want to talk a little bit about the supply chain development efforts that New Jersey has been working through. So if you haven't already, I really recommend taking a look at New Jersey's offshore wind strategic plan. It is quite comprehensive and there are many appendices. So I think taking a first look and then you can kind of filter through what is most applicable to you. It can be a lot to absorb at the beginning. But I wanted to highlight the first. New Jersey is taking a balanced approach to localizing our supply chain. So we are both considering how to support local content and developing our supply chain in New Jersey, as well as acknowledging the importance of keeping price down for ratepayers. So in the strategic plan, you will see some of how we've taken that balanced approach, and therefore our supply chain will localize over time and will be driven a lot by the solicitation schedule, and the solicitation schedules regionally, as we have a steady tranche of projects being delivered across the East Coast and giving more market certainty that projects will continue to move forward in the United States. And most excitingly, earlier this week, BOEM, the federal agency that oversees offshore wind projects, has started to move forward again with the first project in Massachusetts, which means that New Jersey will be moving forward hopefully very soon. And then you can find of course, the strategic plan here. Next slide, please. So in terms of kind of thinking through where you fit in the supply chain and value chain, I wanted to highlight this great image from the Business Network for Offshore Wind's Foundation to Blade course. As you can see, there's several stages of each project, from signing and permitting to manufacturing to construction and installation and operations and maintenance. And that there are tier 1 to tier 3 suppliers, as well as auxiliary services. So there are many ways to get involved at different stages of the project, depending on the role that your business may play. Next slide, please. So one of the first steps about thinking through where you may fit in to the supply chain is understanding kind of the tiering and the different layers of projects. So offshore wind developers, so you may hear of Ørsted, Atlantic Shores, Equinor. These are the developers that manage all the activities required to deliver the project. For smaller companies, it's less likely that you may be contracting directly with the developer, and are more likely contracting with a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 supplier. And then the tier 1 suppliers are some of the OEMs that you may have heard of, like GE and Siemens Gamesa, as the wind turbine generators that make the blades and nacelles, etc., as well as some of the other work packages like foundation suppliers, cable installation, as well as the onshore and offshore wind onshore and offshore substation suppliers. And so for New Jersey based companies, it's more likely that you're in those tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 parts of the supply chain, where you may be selling a component to an OEM or to another supplier. So for example, you could be a company that makes ladders or guard railings or platforms that are selling as a piece to another part of a component. But I think what's important here is not to focus too much on what tier am I, and more on who am I selling my good or service to. And that can help you kind of think through where you fit in the procurement part. Next slide, please. Another item I wanted to note was the timing of activities. So many of the activities, there's both a sequential and overlapping, as well as a long lead up time. So siting and permitting can be 5 to 7 years before a project is completed, and that can include time before a bid is even issued, or a bid is won from a state. It can be after they've secured a federal lease area. Manufacturing will start before the project is, wind turbines are starting to be installed. You want to have some number of products built ahead of time or assembled ahead of time. And then for construction and installation, is where we see a bulk of many of the exciting jobs we talk about, or I should note, manufacturing and construction and installation are where we see the bulk of many of the exciting jobs related to offshore wind kind of come in bits and spurts. So as you see multiple projects being carried out, these are kind of two of the areas where there's a lot of activity. And then after a project is installed, there's the operations and maintenance period that can go on for the lifespan of the project. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick cheat sheet. There's so much to go into here as you think about how to assess your capability to service the industry. But I wanted to highlight a few things here. So first, determine what you would be supplying. Is it something that you currently make and you're looking, you have a bolt or a ladder that you currently produce and you're wanting to sell it to the industry? It may also be a new product. It may be that you're changing the way that you make a ladder so that it is more resistant and ability to withstand the conditions of the ocean, or you need a bolt that's much larger to meet the needs of a offshore wind component. So some of these are maybe require investing in new equipment to make those products. Second, it's important to identify the procurement timeline. So understanding when is the time for you to be looking for new business? When is the time where you should be ready to compete? Third is understanding the safety and business practice expectations. So one of the things we hear time and time again at EDA about offshore wind is the importance of quality and reliability to deliver on time. And the industry as such has developed a number of ways to evaluate that of a potential supplier. So you may need a certificate such as from GWO, Global Wind Organization, or an ISO certification to demonstrate the quality of your product or the safety of your practices. There may be a pre-qualification process or some type of audit to ensure that your business is operating in the way that the supplier may need. And those are things that folks should take very seriously. And then again, as I mentioned, quality and ability to deliver on time are very important. And then lastly, networking and relationship building is very important. This is a mature market abroad, but it's still very nascent in the East Coast, and building those relationships and understanding how to navigate the industry is very important. Next slide, please. So that's all I have for today. I did want to quickly note that we do have our GWO Safety Training Challenge going live on Monday, March 15th, which is a challenge for training providers, whether they public, private, nonprofit, to set up a GWO safety training for as an initial certificate to support future workers in the industry. So I'll put in the chat box the link to that challenge, as well as some of the other resources that you may find helpful, including our offshore wind supply chain registry, which if you haven't joined already, could be a great resource for you to raise your hand and indicate your interest in participating in the industry, as well as to help folks find you in the market. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions at the end. I'll hand it back to Andy now.
Thanks, Julia. That was really educational, and I think everybody, has learned a lot more than they probably knew before they joined this program about what's going on. And communications is always important about progress. And when you look at how long these projects are going to last, there is a lot of opportunity for everybody to get in this. So thanks again, Julia. Up next is Vince Mayone, who serves as Director of Mid-Atlantic External Relations for Ørsted U.S. Offshore Wind, leading Ørsted's external relations initiatives throughout the region. In this role, Vince coordinates strategic efforts and strengthens relationships with markets, government and regulatory bodies, and local stakeholders. Vince previously served as Region President of Atlantic City Electric in New Jersey from 2009 to 2018. He began his career with Atlantic City Electric in 1984, holding various supervisory, management, and senior leadership positions until he retired in 2018 after 33 years of service. He holds licenses as professional engineer in New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. So Vince, I'll turn it over to you. Look forward to your presentation.
Very good. Thank you, Andy. I really appreciate the kind words. So I think we can go to, oh, very good. So good morning, everyone. Nice to see all of you, at least virtually. Hopefully someday this year we'll get to see each other personally. So thanks to Jane, Marlene, and the rest of the team at Southern New Jersey Development Council for having us. So I'm going to be speaking about the Pro New Jersey Grantor Trust. So that is the fund that was established. Hopefully all of you have heard. If you haven't, this will be a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about what Orsted has made available to the state of New Jersey. Next slide. So the Pro New Jersey Grantor Trust was a commitment made by Orsted once we received the first bid from the state of New Jersey BPU for the 1,100 megawatts of offshore wind that Julia mentioned, and I'm sure a lot of you have already heard about. So the project, as you know, is in this blue box you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. And that's the lease area that's presently owned by Orsted. And the topmost part of the box is where we will be installing about 99 turbines 50 miles off the coast of southern New Jersey, which will create, obviously we talked about significant jobs and the energy which will be created by the project to serve over 500,000 homes in the state. Next slide. So as part of that commitment, the Pro New Jersey Trustor Grant Fund was created and was committed $15 million over the life of the project to provide for small women-owned minority businesses and resiliency projects. So that fund was kicked off earlier this year, and we announced the 3 trustees, and from left to right, the 3 trustees that are now fiduciaries and responsible for the entire trust are from left, Belinda Manning from Atlantic County, Beverly McCall, which is actually right below Belinda, and then Lori Pempanella from Ocean County. Beverly is also an attorney, and she's from Cape May County. We were very fortunate to have these fine individuals lead this effort, and they're doing a great job. We also have a 9-panel voluntary advisory committee group, also selected mostly from the 3 counties, Ocean, Atlantic, and Cape May, but also some at-large members from the state. And then we have the Florio, Perucci, Steinhardt, Capelli, Tipton, and Taylor. They are the trust managers, basically doing all the blocking and tackling for this trust fund. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we've kicked off the first application process that was started in February, early February, and it closed actually just last Friday. And as I mentioned, it was for small businesses, women-owned businesses, and minority-owned businesses. And we're very pleased to announce we received over 25 applications for that. So we're really excited. So hopefully we've gotten the message out, but this is not the final opportunity to get involved in this. This is just the first round. We did an expression of interest for this round, and just to see how much interest there were and how people understood how they can get involved in the entire industry. This is about the offshore industry. This is not what they can do exclusively for Orsted or for Ocean Wind, but for all the projects that are going to be planned for New Jersey. So we hope after the advisory committee looks at these applications, they will be asking for full applications to be completed, and we hope to be announcing the first awardees of the first round by this summer. The second request for expressions of interest, which would be for the second part of what this trust was established for, which are for resiliency projects in Ocean, Atlantic, and Cape May counties. So municipalities, universities, engineering firms working with municipalities, and some counties can make application for resiliency projects that they would need funding for in order to make them come to fruition. And we hope to have that expression of interest by the probably by the end of the second quarter of this year. Next slide. So as we mentioned, we did the expressions of interest and then the full application. You can go to our webpage and get all the details. That was all coordinated through our trust manager. And now the next step is where the advisory committee is going to be reviewing and looking through the applications. And then they'll be asking for official formal approvals or formal applications from those applicants that have made application. And then after that, they'll be reviewed again for completeness. And this will be an iterative process. So if one application isn't complete, we will be asking and doing the best we can to allow the applicants to put their best foot forward and to put the best application that's available that they can put forward. So it will be an iterative process, and we hope to get through that. Like I said, probably within the next month or so, the applicants will hear back from the trust manager, and then you'll be asked for putting in a full application. Next slide. These are all the various fields that are available, and I'm not going to be reading over these. You can look at these at your leisure, but there's every facet, and people have been very creative in what they're making application for and what their interest is. It's about what your business can do to either grow, develop, or even establish a new part of your business that could support this industry. There's so many facets of this industry that's available to small businesses, minority businesses. So you don't have to be a big OEM manufacturer. There's a lot that's available for this industry. There's going to be thousands and thousands of jobs over the life of the offshore wind industry. And there's plenty of opportunity. I know people will be creative, and you can get more information from right there on the screen from the ProNewJerseyTrust.org to get more information. I think that concludes my presentation. Next slide. There's our webpage. There's an email. You can get more information. And Grant's here is going to be giving a little bit more information from our procurement group. But I believe that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have later. Back to you, Andy.
Hey, thanks, Vince. And it's really great to see, the inclusion of smaller businesses and already owned businesses is part of this whole project, especially along the coast where, there's a lot of small businesses, as you know, that would be dying to get involved with this. So thanks again. Our next speaker is Grant Van Wingarden, who's Senior Supply Chain Development Manager for Ørsted. Supply chain development is a critical function within Ørsted's offshore procurement organization. And in his role, Grant is focused on growing U.S. supply chain for Ørsted's current and future wind projects. Grant started his career as consultant with Accenture, where he supported the supply chain activities of his clients, most of which were global oil and gas companies. After working on major projects in Canada and Australia, Grant pursued and completed his MBA from Columbia University in New York with a focus on renewable energy. Grant, after traveling around the world and working, welcome to New Jersey, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Andy. I really appreciate that warm introduction, and thank you for the South New Jersey Development Council for organizing this incredible event. We're now at over 150 participants and many names that I recognize of folks that I've been engaging with my pleasured experience with the Ocean Wind project and working with developing the New Jersey supply chain. Before I get started in my presentation, just wanted to highlight that I'm a member of the Ørsted's U.S. procurement organization, and I focus on building a supply chain for offshore wind in the U.S. I do support all of Ørsted's projects in the U.S., including Ocean Wind. I am based in New York, and with Ocean Wind being Ørsted's largest U.S. project, certainly developing the New Jersey supply chain is a top priority for me, and certainly an active role in my overall support for Ørsted. Next slide, please. A little bit about Ørsted. We have more than 25 years of experience with offshore wind. Starting first in 1991, we built the very first offshore wind farm off the coast of Denmark. That was built in 1991. It was a 5 megawatt project, and that was successfully decommissioned at the end of its design life in 2017. We also have a role in America's first offshore wind farm. We're currently operating the 30 megawatt Block Island wind farm. And just last year, we completed the installation of the world's largest offshore wind farm, the Hornsea 1 project off the coast of the UK, and that one's 1.2 gigawatts. In total in our global portfolio, we've installed 7.6 gigawatts. We currently have 2.3 gigawatts under construction, and we are operating and maintaining more than 1,500 turbines across our global portfolio. Next slide, please. For ocean wind, I think at this point in time, from previous events and what Vince had covered, there isn't much more that I can add to this other than just highlighting oceanwind.com, all one word. That's the project website that has a lot of excellent details about the project, more than what's covered on this slide, and also provides an avenue for Ørsted to communicate updates of the project as it progresses through the development life cycle, as contract awards are announced and progress is made. Additionally, I just wanted to highlight that we're thrilled to have our partner, PSE&G, come on board with the Ocean Wind project, and they have a significant equity share in supporting the project as we develop. Next slide, please. This slide shows on the left the map of all the lease areas that have already been awarded to developers like Ørsted and others across the whole eastern coast. And I highlight this because not only is there an incredible opportunity within New Jersey towards the 7,500 megawatt target that New Jersey has for offshore wind, but also that there's a substantial opportunity for New Jersey businesses to export domestically for other projects in other states. And then even beyond that, there is a rapidly growing offshore wind industry abroad. The European industry is already very mature, but is continuously growing. And I'm delighted to be able to share that already the US has secured one export contract from one facility. The Nexans cable production facility in South Carolina has secured a contract for an offshore wind farm in Scotland. So not just are there incredible opportunities for New Jersey businesses in New Jersey, but also in other parts of the country where there are ambitious offshore wind targets in states like New York, Massachusetts, Virginia, but then also significant export opportunities as capabilities and capacities expand here domestically. Next slide, please. This is where I'll spend most of my time presenting. I want to cover the main components and activities that go into building an offshore wind farm and highlight the importance of understanding this to work towards identifying your customer. I really appreciate Julia's presentation earlier. I think I'm going to have to borrow that slide from the Business Network for Offshore Wind, illustrating all the very different tiers of supply chain partners that exist in building an offshore wind farm. I think that's a complicated landscape, and understanding that is so important for any business interested in getting into the industry, because if you want to be successful in making sales, you clearly need to understand who your customers are, how they go about procurement, and when that procurement takes place. So as a developer, most of our work or procurement work focuses on major packages. And for the most part, we have generally two types of packages that we award contracts to, the first being supply, and then the other one being transport and installation, or often as we call T&I. We do have other packages or types of packages like EPC and design build that are very common in other industries. But those are the main ones. And the contracts that we award or packages that we award are to major contractors, commonly referred to as tier ones. And so if I'm just going to walk through this slide, starting from the left, the most obvious component of an offshore wind farm are the turbines themselves. And for the Ocean Wind project, we're absolutely thrilled to have awarded the supply and installation contract to General Electric, and they will be providing the GE Haliade X turbine to the Ocean Wind project. That's a 12 megawatt turbine, incredible technology. The first prototype is the largest wind turbine spinning in the world today. It's in the port of Rotterdam. And yeah, we're really thrilled to be working with GE on that. So GE would be our tier one contractor. And then the other major component that needs to be highlighted is the foundations. So the turbines sit on top of the foundations, which are secured into the sea floor. And there are many different types of foundations used in offshore wind. For Ørsted's portfolio, we've selected monopiles for our US portfolio. I won't get into too many details about monopiles because Lee from EEW will be presenting next. And yeah, he's got a lot to talk about specifically for monopiles in New Jersey. We're delighted to be working with EEW with the facility in Paulsboro. Outside of the foundations and the turbines, the next major packages that a developer like Ørsted would be looking to contract for would be cables. And there's 4 main contracts related to cables, but there's a lot of opportunities for local businesses as subcontracts within that. The 4 contracts are 2 supply contracts and 2 T&I contracts. So first supply, as highlighted in purple on the slide, is array cables. We secure a supply contract for those cables that connect turbines to each other and then consolidate power from strings of turbines to the offshore substation. There's a transport and installation contract that goes with that. The cables are buried under the seafloor, and there's a substantial amount of surveying, seafloor civil work, and other marine activity that is all involved in the T&I portion of that scope, and that we anticipate a lot of New Jersey businesses to be involved in for Ocean Wind and local businesses for other projects in the US. The other portion of the cables packages are the export cable. We have a supply package for export cables, which are used to transmit power from the offshore substation to land. And there's a substantial package for the transport and installation of that cable package as well. For the offshore substations themselves, we have similarly a supply and T&I contracts related to that. These substations require extremely heavy lift vessels to lift the vessels onto the larger foundations because they're significant loads. And these would require assets that are involved in the global vessel fleet for heavy lifting applications. But there's a substantial amount of other activities, support activities, whether that's scout vessels or marine mammal observing, or other offshore and marine civil construction and related support activities. And one other scope I wanted to mention too with the cable laying is that for areas where cables are buried or cannot be buried because of tough soil conditions or crossing existing assets, there is an amount of cable protection that's required. And this would be either rock placements, concrete mattresses, or other technologies that are used for that. And we would expect many of that to all be included in the from local business opportunities. Before I get into the onshore activities, I recognize that I skipped over a major package which is related to the foundations. The interface between the monopile and the turbine tower, there's 4 major components. And at Ørsted, we call these advanced foundation components. And we are very close to announcing contracts. We have some tenders ongoing for the fabrication of these components, all in the United States. The first component is called an anode cage. It's a sacrificial corrosion protection material that is attached to the monopile. We also have a boat landing and ladder that allows technicians to climb from the seafloor to access the turbine tower. And then on the outside of the base of the tower, we have an external concrete platform, which is used to allow technicians to access the exterior of the base of the tower. And the last component is called the suspended internal platform, which is several stories tall, and it's inserted into the monopile and acts as levels for the technician to access, but also housing for major components and cable trays. So now moving towards the right, at the cable landing itself, there is often a horizontal directional drill or other techniques to bury the cable underneath the landing point that we anticipate a substantial amount of civil engineering and construction to support that activity. And then there's a significant distance from the landing point to the onshore substation. And again, civil works related to that work. And then lastly, I recognize that this is probably an important topic for many of the folks on the call, onshore substations. In August last year, we organized an event related to the tender for the EPC works of our onshore substations for Ocean Wind. That tender is still ongoing. There's been a slight pause as we anticipate or wait for more milestones in the federal permitting process. We have not yet selected an EPC contractor, but we anticipate a substantial amount of New Jersey businesses to support the construction of those onshore substations to connect the offshore wind farm to the local grid. And then lastly, with operations and maintenance, Julia did a good job covering this for the life of Ocean Wind and for all offshore wind farms. There's a base onshore nearest to the wind farm that acts as a point for technicians to travel to through crew transfer vessels or service operation vessels to the wind farm to perform their operations and maintenance activities. Next slide, please. Ørsted has ambitious carbon targets. I highlight this because we have a goal of being carbon neutral within our supply chain by 2040. And for suppliers interested in developing technologies to reduce their own emissions or to be carbon neutral themselves, you have an active customer in Ørsted. We're very eager in helping developing that and pursuing procurement opportunities to help us achieve that carbon neutrality target within our supply chain. Next slide, please. For folks interested in getting involved, we have our procurement process portal that our global sourcing managers use to identify contractors to invite to tender. You can access that at orstedprocurement.com. You can create an account and keep it updated and keep us informed of your company, your capabilities, et cetera. I also highlight the EDA's supply chain registry for offshore wind. Our sourcing managers, as well as those for our tier 1 contractors, actively use this to identify local New Jersey businesses that they can invite to tender. So it's really important to register there. And next slide, please. With that, I will hand the microphone back to Andy, and I look forward to the Q&A and the breakout sessions after that. Thank you, everyone.
Grant, thanks. I would really say you connected the dots as to how the whole process is going to work, which is very enlightening. So thanks again. Up next is Lee Lorendo, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of EEW Group American Offshore Structures, a subsidiary of EEW Group headquartered in Germany. EEW is a market leader in the supply of monopile foundations for offshore wind. EEW is developing a new state-of-the-art monopile facility at the Port of Paulsboro, and Lee will have the overall responsibility for the realization of this operation. Lee's experience and knowledge in engineering construction of factories includes recently delivering the Holtec factory in Camden, a 500,000 square foot heavy manufacturing factory. He was assigned the responsibility of designing the factory from the ground up, including the automation and robotics that resulted in a highly efficient, lean manufacturing facility. Lee was one of the first people I met when I came on board of the South Jersey Port Corp, and we worked very closely with him on putting a lease together with others for the Paulsboro Marine Terminal. And Lee told me this morning that he'll be joining the Development Council as a member. So welcome, Lee.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Andy and Jane and the council for setting up this event. I think it's really great that we're communicating out, all of our latest updates, and it's a super exciting time, for offshore wind here in New Jersey. And again, my name is Lee Lorendo. So, we have a company here in the U.S., American Offshore Structures, and we are just starting on our journey here in Paulsboro to build our monopile factory. So next slide. And again, there's a little bit of background how we're getting here. This was really a collaboration with our customer, Ørsted. EW would be a tier 1 supplier, as was noted earlier. So our customer is Ørsted. We are supplying monopiles to them for the Ocean Wind 1 project to be installed off of Atlantic City. Our mission here is to bring over a clone of our German factory to New Jersey. Along with that, we'll be creating hundreds of construction jobs and manufacturing jobs. And our goal is not just New Jersey, as Grant said. Our goal is to supply the entire U.S. offshore wind market, whether that's Virginia or Massachusetts. Those products and those jobs will be right here in Paulsboro. So we're really excited about that. A few pictures. You really don't get to see monopiles very much after they're installed because they're mostly underwater. So you can, kind of get a view as to what they look like during installation. They're transported horizontally, stood up vertically, and then they are, hydraulically rammed into the ocean floor. The portion that you see that's unpainted on the bottom is the portion that goes into the sand in the ocean floor. 100 to 150 feet inserted into the ocean floor. So next slide. So again, our mission here is to bring a copy of our German factory here to Paulsboro. So these are some pictures, both inside and outside of our factory in Rostock, Germany. We have a very long-standing relationship with Ørsted in Europe and have supplied them over 1,000 monopiles in the European market. Our factory in Germany produces about 100 monopiles per year and employs over 500 factory workers. So, this is our overall mission, is to replicate this here at the Port of Paulsboro. Next slide. So what is that going to look like? Here's our rendering of the Port of Paulsboro. Currently there's not much there to see, but we're working on changing that. We will have approximately 500,000 square feet of manufacturing space over the 6 buildings that you see here. It'll be heavy manufacturing, very large buildings with overhead cranes and lifting capacity. We currently have approximately 80 acres of land at the port. And I think everybody is aware at the Port of Paulsboro, there's already a heavy quayside at Paulsboro, which gives us the advantage of, once we build the factory, we're all ready to go as far as shipping these monopiles out to the site in New Jersey, or in the future, any site, up and down the East Coast. Okay, next slide. Monopile manufacturing, we are setting up this factory to build the largest monopiles in the world. And, you heard Grant and others talk about how the turbines keep getting bigger and bigger. The monopiles to support them also keep getting bigger and bigger. And, our experience in Germany is as soon as you upgrade your factory, it's obsolete about 2 years later. So, we're starting out with some, fairly large dimensions so that we can anticipate future growth. So the dimensions that we'll be able to produce are monopiles that are 40 feet in diameter, up to 400 feet long, and 2,500 tons, or 5 million pounds of steel. So you can get an idea of how fantastically huge these are. To give you an idea, I think if you look at the one picture where the guy is standing inside of the ring, that's a 10-meter ring. We'll be able to produce up to 12-meter rings at Paulsboro. So it's absolutely large scale manufacturing. The jobs in the factory will resemble shipbuilding. It will be welding and painting and grinding and all the other things that come along, roll bending, plate cutting. So that's what give you a little bit of insight as to what the manufacturing will look like. Next slide. So here is the building that we're setting out to construct as we speak. So this is going to be our final assembly hall. We call it our Circwell building. To get started with manufacturing, we're going to bring over rolled segments from Germany. We won't have the full manufacturing capability, but we'll roll those, we'll weld those rings together here in this building as a final assembly hall, and then finish the painting and coating that we need to do, and get those ready and staged to be shipped out to the Ocean Wind project coming up. So next slide. And a little bit of insight as to what's inside of this building. You can get I don't know if you can see the people standing around as far as perspective, but this is fantastically huge equipment that we're bringing in as far as welding the monopiles. So it requires a very large building. So this will be about 160-foot wide building, and this is what we'll hopefully see in the near future. We'll be doing welding of monopiles here in New Jersey. Next slide. So where are we at as far as our project? As Andy said, we've signed the lease as of January 1st, and we are on site. We are working on finalizing our project labor agreement with the unions that oversees the construction. As a general schedule, this winter we are doing the site work for the Circwell building. So you can see some pictures of that work in process. In the spring, we will be setting the foundations for this building. To give you an idea, just to handle this large equipment, that's a concrete floor that's 4 feet thick and larger than a football field, including the end zones. It's going to be a big, heavy foundation. Over the summer, we'll begin the steel erection. In the fall, we'll be doing the building skin and roof, and in the winter of next year, we'll be fitting out the mechanicals. So we're on a fairly aggressive schedule. We need to build the factory. We need to fit it out with equipment. We need to hire and train the staff, and we need to execute on the manufacturing all in time to meet Ørsted's schedule. Next slide. And here's a rendering of the blast and paint building. Again, these monopiles have to live their life in the ocean. So, we have a 3-layer epoxy paint inside and outside, any place where we're exposed to seawater. So, you can imagine this is a massive painting operation. It's over 1,000 gallons of paint for each monopile to kind of put that in perspective. So that's another building that will be erected this year, and we'll get started on. Next slide. And we always get asked, how do these get out to the installation site? And this is what we'll see off of the new wharf that was recently constructed at the Port of Paulsboro with South Jersey Port Corp. The monopiles move around on these multi-wheeled vehicles, so we'll have 100+ wheels underneath each monopile to take the load. These get driven onto barges. The barges get taken out to the installation site, and then you saw the large jackup vessels that have the ability to lift these up and put them into position. What's interesting from the manufacturing standpoint is these are all installed typically during the summer months. So we manufacture all year long. So, we will be manufacturing the entire year and probably have close to 100 of these on site ready for the installation season during the summer. So it did require us to have a lot of acreage at the Port of Paulsboro just to store the monopiles. All right, next slide. Yeah, and I also want to make a note, just, I want to thank, this was really a lot of collaboration. This was really driven by Ørsted bringing the supply chain here to New Jersey. So we worked with them in collaboration, as well as New Jersey and the EDA. And I think for those on the phone who lived through this past year, there was a lot of work and effort to make this happen and have this come to reality and bring the jobs forward to New Jersey. So we're really excited about this. I hopefully the next time we present, we'll show you some pictures of buildings going up, and after that, manufactured a monopile. So EEW is just the beginning of bringing the supply chain to New Jersey, and looking forward to other companies joining us here. So thanks, Andy, and back to you.
Okay, thanks, Lee. And it's a great story. And I look forward to seeing the first monopile and be able to walk up to it. So let's stay in the loop with that. Okay. Up next is Dane Perman, who's Senior Vice President, Energy Market Lead with Haley and Aldridge, Inc. Dane is a natural resource and permitting specialist who graduated from Stockton University with a bachelor's in biology. Following graduation, he worked in the consulting engineering business as a wetland subject matter expert, a project manager, and a permitting strategist for energy and other infrastructure projects in New Jersey and around the world. Working from his home in Camden, New Jersey, he is now accountable for the operations and growth of Haley and Aldridge's environmental, geotechnical, management, consulting services lines, and energy markets. So Dane, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to give a presentation maybe from the other side and the other perspective, from a company doing business and working with the companies and the organizations that have just been talking for a little bit. This is probably more of a case study. If you want to go to the next slide. So I'll do it very brief because a lot of this has already been covered. Primer on where things are with offshore wind in New Jersey, how our company has learned to connect to the market, and where we are right now. So, from my perspective, I'm born and bred in New Jersey. I've watched the market develop in New Jersey and along the Eastern Seaboard. Most of my career has been working in and around the Northeast of the United States. So I've been following the offshore wind market really since 2010, when there started to be quite a bit of interest and discussion about developing this market. So I've had an opportunity to stumble along and try to figure out how to connect to the market, how things are being done. Some of the discussion that Grant and Julia had earlier about understanding specifically where your services fit into the market, and learning that has been completely spot on and necessary as we've learned to kind of connect to that. So if you want to go to the next slide, and the next slide after that. So, currently, I think, as everyone's talked about, New Jersey is really at the epicenter of the offshore wind energy market. I mean, the Mid-Atlantic coast, New England coast is one of the strongest wind resource areas in the world, actually. And the fact that we have a long and relatively shallow continental shelf makes it a really great place to go ahead and build out offshore wind. It's been a long, slow path. There have been some starts along the way or fits and starts along the way. Some projects have moved forward and then stalled. I think what we've seen now since really the record leases that went out in 2017, and a lot of the European market becoming mature and actually delivering energy and a significant amount of energy into the European market, there's been a lot of momentum picking up. So we see strong, positive, both social and economic drivers to move the market forward. And as you've heard, New Jersey is all in. There's firm commitments from the governor. There's power purchasing agreements from BPU. We've got excellent port facilities, and we're in front of developing those, or we're developing those in advance of the wind farms, which is obviously necessary to do. So all the indicators are very positive for moving ahead. Next slide, please. So you've heard this, I think Grant had this and Julia had this in their presentation. Here's yet another graphic showing sort of how it works. And I'm not going to belabor this. I think the point's been pretty made. You've got some major components to it. And for New Jersey businesses and other businesses, there's many different ways to connect, and it's super important to understand what it is that you do and the services or the goods that you provide and how they connect and how they tie into the market. So I'll touch on this a little bit later. There's a resource at the top of this slide that is a really excellent resource for understanding some more of the details about how the offshore wind market works. So I recommend you take a look at that. Next slide. And I think as Julia touched on earlier, the process for offshore wind development actually starts long before projects are even identified. The Bureau of Offshore Energy Management begins a process of studying the impacts of developing and putting out leases for the seafloor. And then, of course, the seafloor is leased to different interested developers to go ahead and site their farms. That whole process happens 5 or more years in advance of most people ever hearing about a project like Ocean Wind, for example. And from there, there is the site assessment process, the construction and operations plan, the whole federal permitting process. That can take up to 5 years. State permitting and project design, that can be done concurrently, but that's also a significant process. Then there's the operations and maintenance. So there's all the work, as these wind farms operate and what's required to keep them running well. That's another 25 years worth of business market out there. And then there's the decommissioning part. So after these have reached their lives, generally speaking, they need to be dismantled or decommissioned. And don't know that it's been done yet, but that's another major component for businesses to tie into. So the message here, really, it's a long process. There's lots of ways to tie into it. And you might be at the back end of that supply chain, so you just need to be patient, but stay connected. For New Jersey, these projects have been covered pretty well. So there's the Ørsted PSE&G partnerships. Those are the Ocean Wind, Garnsey Offshore Energy, which is off at the mouth of the Delaware Bay. There's the Atlantic Shores project, which is a partnership between EDF and Shell, which is north of Ørsted's project, or Ocean Wind project. And then there's lease areas that are coming up. BOEM is about to release new leases for the Hudson North and South parts of the New York Bight. So those are shown in green on this. So you can see a big portion of that is off the coast of New Jersey as well. So not only this current tranche of projects that's happening, but there's a whole other tranche of projects that's going to be coming down the line. And the one really good thing that's happened this week, actually, the Vineyard Wind project, which you can see in the upper corner of this in red, which is off of Massachusetts, actually got their federal permit approval this week, which is a massive I'm sorry, yeah, you need to advance the slide. I'm sorry. Yes. So Vineyard Wind project in the upper right is they just got their federal permit, which is a big accomplishment. The first project of this size and scale to get their federal permit approval. And it kind of lays the groundwork for how everyone else can do the same. So it's a big move forward. So next slide, please. And next slide again. So, some of the lessons we've learned on how to connect to the market, be patient. I think I talked about that. But, be very clear on the value that you bring and where it connects. So for Haley and Aldrich, as a geotechnical and as an environmental consulting firm, we've got offices up and down in the same area where this market is developing. And over time, we've developed over 70 years of working here, a very extensive library of geologic, geotechnical conditions. So we believe that is a really strong value that we present to the market, especially at the places where export cables are coming on shore and interconnections are happening, as well as work offshore where we've done work in the past. But we've also partnered with the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute because what we wanted to do is understand how to take that wealth of data and use it in a market that's new to us in the United States. So NGI and our partnership with NGI has helped us to really understand how to look at that data, how to draw that data, organize that data, and help our clients to develop that and develop the knowledge they need to develop their projects along the way. So that's been a really important thing for us to understand and help connect to the market. Next slide. So, you know, the services that we know are in demand and that we deliver into this market are critical issues analysis for interconnection route planning, the horizontal directional drill trenchless technology for design for getting those export cables onto the beach essentially, or under the beach and into the onshore substations. And then, you know, as Grant mentioned earlier, that's often a fairly long throw. So there's oftentimes tidal creeks or environmentally sensitive areas or other areas where additional HDD is necessary. So we know that our capability of doing that design and the geotechnical studies that go with that has been important to the market. We do geotechnical investigations for pilings and foundations at these port facilities and harbor facilities, as well as the substations. You know, oftentimes these lands are contaminated or there's contamination associated with them, especially if they're brownfields type of sites. So we know that there's an opportunity there to help developers of both the port facilities and the onshore facilities to address those issues. You know, we do hazard assessment, so earthquake and climatic risk assessment. One concern about developing on the coastline is climate change and the impacts of sea level rise. So those are things that we understand and help our clients to understand. And then, of course, the environmental permitting and the supporting studies that are necessary on the land side to support these projects coming onshore. So things like wetlands and addressing cultural resources, protected species, ecological mitigation, things like that. Next slide, please. So for us, what we've learned is we really play in this kind of red space that I've outlined on this. We are really looking primarily in the interconnection space because we know that that is where the knowledge that we have and the knowledge that we've developed and the services that we deliver really play well. And that's been important. And I'll refer to Grant's presentation again. So, you know, Grant was talking about the event that they did for Ocean Wind and getting connected to that and having an opportunity to sit and talk with each of the EPC procurement people about our services and what we do in there as it relates to those interconnection projects in the onshore substation has been hugely important for us to understand the market and connect to it. So my advice would be anybody interested in this market, take advantage of every one of those that you can. Next slide, please. You know, I think Julia talked a little bit about networking, and I want to give some practical advice on that. So, you know, participation in market organizations and activities is really critical. You know, to know and be known in this market or any market for that matter is incredibly important. So some of the key organizations is the Business Network for Offshore Wind. So we've all borrowed from their graphics and their resources pretty well. American Clean Power, which used to be the American Wind Energy Association, is another key organization. Social organizations, there's a group called Offshore Wind Drinks New York. Anybody interested in participating in that? It's a great place for, there's presentations from various developer organizations or other stakeholders. And it's just a nice social way to kind of get together, especially now when it's really difficult to get together because of the pandemic. And then regional business organizations like, you know, the Southern New Jersey Development Council, New Jersey Alliance for Action is another one. So those are ways to really connect into the market. Also things like thought leadership and social presence. You know, we spend a lot of time developing blog articles and content that help developers or help either first or second tier contractors understand how we can help them and some of the lessons we've learned along the way. So on our website, we put these, we often throw them up on LinkedIn as articles that we put on social media, and of course branding. So you know, getting your name out there, getting your image out there, getting your logo out there. You know, I hope that anytime someone thinks about geotechnical investigations and design, that they think of that blue and green logo on the bottom corner of the screen. So it's just a matter of being persistent and staying engaged in the market. Next slide. And then working with the developer procurement organization. So, as others have talked about here, the developers have a vested interest in using local and disadvantaged businesses. So again, participate in those contractor forums. Learn how the projects are procured and where and when your services get procured. For us, understanding that onshore substation and the interconnection was going to be an EPC contract really helped us to understand who our target audience was. So while we wanted companies like Ørsted or Atlantic Shores or Equinor to know who we were, it was really important that we connected with those EPC contractors that might be working and trying to procure services there. So we're a second tier, maybe a third tier contractor in a lot of cases. So it's really important to know where you fit and when those opportunities come out to be present for them. And again, the procurement organizations have their own websites to go ahead and connect into. So I encourage you to do those. You've seen those at many points in this presentation. I put them here as well. The Business Network for Offshore Wind has their own. And so I would also encourage you to add that to your list as well. And also watch the websites of other offshore wind projects. So the Atlantic Shores project is a little bit further back in the chain than the Ocean Wind project. At some point, they're going to be moving forward and doing this. So stay connected and follow the market. Next slide, please. Developing partnerships. So we talked about those higher tier contractors. So for us as a second or a third tier contractor, we really need to understand who are the people that are going to play in the market at a tier above us or two tiers above us, and to really tie into those. Think about complementary or bundled services that add value. So for us, for example, we don't do in-house cultural resource consulting, but there are a number of disadvantaged businesses that we do a lot of work with that do those services and deliver those services. So we can develop partnerships with them and help bring them in, which of course help the developers meet their procurement goals. And again, trade organizations, so things like SMJDC, stay engaged with all of those things. So, where are we now? So about 2 years ago, one more slide, please. So about 2 years ago, I came into Hailing Eldridge to really help develop our energy market, and in particular, our offshore energy market. And 2 years ago, we were not earning any revenue in this market. Today, we're earning about $1 million a year in the market, and obviously, we hope that would grow. But how have we done that? We've actually connected in all the ways that I just talked about, and that's resulted in us doing a lot of different things. We're doing HDD designs on 2 separate offshore wind projects. We're doing cable and substation grid interconnection feasibility studies and designs for 2 different ones. We're doing a nearshore geotech investigation to look at the geology coming into the landfalls for export cables and helping them make the correct alignment and for those export cables. We're doing a study on volcanic soils for one of the offshore wind developers, which is a very difficult soil for pilings and for geotechnical reasons, especially for big heavy structures like monopoles and port facilities. And we're doing piling and stability investigation designs at 2 different offshore wind marine support terminals. So it is very easy, not very easy, but it's very possible to connect to a lot of different places in the market. And it doesn't take long to do that. It's just really important to understand where and when, and then connect into that right place. So next slide. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions about what we do, how we've done it, just need some advice or some more follow-up on how, other organizations and ways that you can connect, feel free to give me a call. Very happy to help folks connect to this market. And as a local Jersey guy, I am really excited to see this market finally develop and look forward to seeing it develop in the future. So with that, Jane, I think I'd hand it back to you at this point. So thank you. Mute.
Hi, thank you. Sorry. I want to thank Dean for your remarks. At this time, I want to invite the other speakers to turn their cameras on, join the Q&A. And let me start real quick with one for Vince Mayone. Is it possible for the second request for expressions to include Cumberland County because of the Bayshore community there?
Thanks, Jane, and thanks for the question. Well, we focus most, and by the bylaws, we focus on the resiliency projects along the Atlantic shore right now. So that's what we committed to, at least for this round and for the trust. I'd have to talk to our trust manager and our local attorney just to see if we can extend it to the Bay, to Cumberland County. I mean, then it could wrap all the way around, right? We go to Cumberland County, Salem County, and up to Gloucester County. So we'd have to look at that. But I appreciate the question. I don't know the answer, so let me take it back to our team and see if we can at least extend it around the corner into Cumberland County.
Okay, thank you. And this question might be for Lee, and maybe Grant might want to jump in as well. We've got this also offline. Would there be any requirements for any of the components to be manufactured in the United States? Are we looking for a Buy American requirements for some of these materials?
Yeah, I'll probably let Grant speak as well, but currently no. I mean, we're just kind of competing on the world stage. So, you know, from my perspective in monopiles, my competition is monopiles made in Europe. We have an advantage that it costs about $1 million each to ship them over the ocean. So that's my starting point. But right now there's no made in America requirements. You know, it would be great if that was part of the ITC, or we could get some of those things in there, but currently no. And Grant, you could speak if that's your view of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree with that. There is no specific Buy in America requirements that we or other developers have to operate under. However, for each of our projects, as Julia pointed out, our customers, they prioritize price of electrons and local economic development. And so as we participate in competitive solicitations, we and other developers are putting forward in proposals opportunities to develop the local economy and supply chains. And when projects are awarded, developers become held to those commitments. And with Ørsted across our portfolio, we have commitments to buy or spend money in each of the states, New Jersey included. We have some flexibility in how we meet those commitments and spend money and develop the economy. But they're not as specific as perhaps mentioned in the question.
Thank you. For Lee, is the goal to eventually roll steel at the Paulsboro facility?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing this in 2 phases. So phase 1 came out with the, with Ørsted's Ocean Wind 1 announcement to do the phase 1. That gets us kind of halfway into the manufacturing. And, our intention is 18 months later to start on phase 2, which would be the full rendering that you saw, all 6 buildings, including roll bending steel here in Paulsboro. Yes.
And then I'll take one last question, and I apologize, we didn't get to enough of them. Any estimates on the number of and types of jobs that you expect at the Paulsboro facility?
Again, when we're fully up and running, it's going to be a duplicate of our factory in Germany. They're currently at 500. I don't have the exact numbers, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be very close to those numbers. We're building the exact same facility with the exact same capacity. So that's our goal. Obviously, we have to build out the factory and fill it with orders. We think there's a good market in front of us. So that's absolutely our goal. And, I think one other thing is, for every job we have inside of our fence, there's a multiplier outside the fence, with the local supply chain. We're very focused on New Jersey, both for construction and manufacturing goods and services. So we're absolutely looking to build our supply chain. So like I said, for every job, inside of our fence doing manufacturing, there's, a multiplier of 2 or 3x external to that for goods and services that we buy.
Thank you. We're coming up on 11:30, and I just want to remind folks that we're going to put in the chat the link to the breakout sessions. It's the same link for everybody. So once enough people log in, Zoom will shuffle the deck and put you in your assigned room, and that'll be the opportunity to ask some more very specific questions. There were a number that were posed, and I'll look to try to get some of the answers to those questions from our panelists. But it's an opportunity in the breakout session for you to ask those direct questions. And I just want to close with how excited we are about the economic impact of the offshore wind industry of the South Jersey. It can't be any more exciting. As you've heard today, we're talking about a whole new workforce of construction and maintenance jobs, work for architects and engineers of all types, mapping and surveying and computer and telecommunication companies, transportation and maintenance companies, skilled metal manufacturing jobs, painting jobs, legal, accounting, banking, and financial services. The list goes on and on. And in the chat feature, I posted a link to many of those types of products and services and materials that are going to be required. It's not since the casino industry came to South Jersey have we seen a workforce of this size being created, and we're really excited. We hope you will, the company will be able to capitalize on the opportunity to grow by entering the offshore supply chain. And again, we thank the South Jersey Port Corporation for their sponsorship today. And to our speakers, it is with your support that we continue to provide information and important content. A special thanks to the SNJDC staff, Randy and Ben, who helped manage all of the details and the moving parts in organizing today's webinar, and to Marlene Masalta, who's the president of the SNJDC, who covered everything else in the past 2 days. We really appreciate all of our staff's time in helping make this together, this possible. I'll remind you again, we'll share in an email the link to the replay, the slide presentation we've just watched, as well as a program book with a directory of the attendees and contact information, and that way you all can connect. And with that, I hope the link to the breakout sessions will be in your chat. It's also in an email you would have received from us last night around 4 o'clock. I thank you all for being here this morning. We're going to give it a couple of minutes, and then we're going to go log right back into the breakout sessions where we can spend some time to ask some very specific questions of each of our presenters. So thanks again for joining us this morning. Wishing you good health and a speedy economic recovery. Have a great day.